Alright, guys, welcome to the second episode of this topic, the embryology of the cardiovascular system. In this episode, our focus will be on the development of the heart chambers. So, let's kickstart with the right atrial development. However, we can't thoroughly dissect or demystify the development of the right atrium without discussing about the sinus venosus, which is key in its development. And yes, the sinus venosus is that part of the heart too, that is the caudalmost part, which we have come to realize receives venous drain of the whole fetal body. It begins this function of venous drain at about day 24 of gestation, corresponding to the middle of the 4th week. At this time, here is how the heart tube looks like as it's undergoing cardiac looping. And here is the atrium as it connects to the sinus venosus. The sinus venosus consists of two sinus horns, the right sinus horn and the left sinus horn, with each horn being recipient to three veins or venous system, as we have it, and they include the vitelline vein or venous system, the umbilical vein, or as we have it, the venous system, and the common cardinal vein. Of note to bear in mind is that each venous system consists of a pair of veins, with one of each pair draining into the respective ipsilateral side. Much about the venous system will be discussed in detail in subsequent videos. So, initially, the connection between the sinus venosus and the atrium is wide and central. However, following a series of vascular re-architecture plus a resulting left-to-right shunt of blood, the entrance of connection shifts to the right. And perhaps you'll be wondering how so. So let's get into the details of how this come about. The left sinus horn begins to lose its importance following the obliteration of the left vitelline vein during the 5th week of gestation. At about the 7th to 8th week of gestation, the proximal part of the left umbilical vein loses its connection to the heart and disappears following a well-structured anastomosis in the liver. However, the final decimation to the importance of the left sinus horn is the obliteration of the left common cardinal vein during the 10th week of gestation. And as a result, there's a prior compensatory left-to-right shunt of blood, making the right sinus horn to enlarge greatly, owing to the increased blood volume it conveys, as it being the only connection between the atrium and the venous drain of the whole fetal body. At this stage, all that is left of the left sinus horn becomes the oblique vein of the left atrium and its coronary sinus, following vascular remodeling. In later development, the right sinus horn is seen to begin its incorporation into the right side of the atrium. As the incorporation occurs, two valvular folds, right and left, appear at the sinoatrial orifice. These valves fuse at their dorsocranial end to form a ridge called the septum spurium. Once fully incorporated, that is, the sinus horn, the left venous valve, as well as the septum spurium, fuses with the developing atrial septum as the right venous valve completely disintegrates. The incorporated sinus horn forms the smooth wall of the right atrium and is termed the sinus venorum of the right atrium. So, for a bit of organization and better understanding, pardon me to talk about the septum formation in the atrium before going into a development of the left atrium. So, concurrently occurring is the septum formation in the atrium. Generally speaking, however, septal formation in the heart begins at day 27 and is completed at day 37 of gestation, and it begins with the appearance of endocardial cushions, which are embryonic connective tissues covered by endothelium and has the characteristic property to proliferate and protrude into, but however, limited to within the heart. It also plays a role in development of another heart structure which will be discussed in subsequent video. This mass of tissue are strategically sited at the atrioventricular region and the conotruncal region. At the atrioventricular region, the endocardial cushions are derived from overlying endocardial cells that detach from its neighbors and move into the matrix. While at the conotruncal region, they are derived from neural crest cells migrating from the cranial neural fold to the outflow tract. Septum formation in the atrium begins at the end of the 4th week with the appearance of a thin crescent-like structure which appears at the roof of the common atrium. Taking a cross-section view of the heart through its apex, we see this crescent-like structure, which is termed the septum premium, as it continues to grow towards the fusing atrioventricular endocardial cushions. However, it doesn't completely divide the atrium as it leaves a portion of communication between the two atrial chambers. This communication or opening is termed the ostium premium or the foramen premium. Soon after, the septum is completed upon the fusion of the atrioventricular endocardial cushions. However, before completion of the septum, programmed cell death, that is apostasis, occur at the upper portion of the septum premium, thus resulting in perforation in the septum. Amalgamation or coalescence of this perforation give rise to an opening in the septum premium called the ostium secundum or the foramen secundum, thus ensuring a continual connection or shunt between both atrial chambers. The septum premium left attached to the roof of the atrium soon after disintegrate following the incorporation of the sinus horn, which will later result in the appearance of a new crescent-shaped fold that emerges at the ventrocranial wall of the right atrium, just adjacent to the septum premium. This muscular crescent fold is termed the septum secundum, and it continues to grow but forms an incomplete partition between the atrial chambers. The opening left behind by the septum secundum is termed the foramen ovale. Further development sees the septum secundum form an overlap over the ostium secundum as the septum spurium and the left venous valve fuses to its right side, which was discussed earlier in the presentation. So, the remainder of the septum premium, which is attached to the atrioventricular endocardial cushion, form a flap-like one-way valve for the foramen ovale. And that completes the atrial septum formation. So far so good, guys. I hope there hasn't been a sort of disinterest towards this presentation. Perhaps it has occurred. I suggest you take a break from this video, go get a bit of fresh air, and maybe grab a drink in the process. If not, let's move on to the left atrial development and the formation of the pulmonary veins. So, as the primitive right atrium expands by the incorporation of the sinus horn, the primitive left atrium likewise expands. Its process of expansion begins as the mesenchyme of the dorsal mesocardium begins to proliferate, thus forming a dorsal mesenchymal protrusion which grows with the septum premium as it extends towards the AV canal. Embedded in this dorsal mesenchymal protrusion is the root of the pulmonary veins. And at this stage that we see here, on is just the main stem that opens into the left atrium. However, with continuous expansion of the left atrium, the pulmonary vein is incorporated more up to the point where it gives us two branches, one to each lung, and then to the point where all four veins, that is, two from each lung, drain independently or directly into the left atrium. With this, the primordial left and right atrium form the trabeculated part in both atria, while their incorporation form the smooth wall and majority of the atrial circumference. In the right atrium, the smooth wall and the trabeculated wall is delineated by what is termed the crista terminalis, which corresponds to the exterior fixture which is termed the sulcus terminalis. With all we have said, you see and perhaps agree with our reason as to why we mentioned this in the segment of the previous video. Now to the ventricles. From the previous episode of this topic, we derived that the primordial ventricle of the heart tube gave rise to the left ventricle, while the distal half of the bulbus gave rise to the right ventricle. Further growth or development of the ventricles correlate with the development of the interventricular septum. As at the end of the fourth week, as with the atrium, the septal formation in the ventricle begins. Each ventricle begins to expand as a result of progressive growth of the myocardium exteriorly and continuous diverticulations and trabecular formation on the interior. As a result, the medial wall of both ventricles begins to oppose against each other and subsequently merge. Initially, the newly formed muscular interventricular septum gains height with the dilation of each ventricle, but later, the size of the septum increases owing to the active proliferation of myoblasts in the septum. Nonetheless, the muscular septum does not divide the ventricles completely, as there is still a small portion situated between the rim of the muscular septum and the atrioventricular endocardial cushion that allows communication or shunt between the ventricles. This opening of foramen, as we have it, is termed the interventricular foramen. However, this foramen is short-lived, as upon completion of the corneal septum, the foramen further shrinks. Soon after, proliferation and outgrowth of mesenchymal cells from the inferior atrioventricular endocardial cushion occurs, which later fuses with the muscular rim of the septum. With this, the ventricle is now completely separated and deprived of any direct connection. Of note to bear in mind, however, is that this mesenchymal outgrowth from the inferior endocardial cushion in the AV canal is not muscular but rather membranous in nature. So with this, we have come to the end of this video session on the development of the heart chambers, and we hope you found it enjoyable and worth the time. As for the What Could Go Wrong session, we found it best to merge it with our video on heart defects, which the link will be in the description box below. So be sure to check it out, as it promises to be packed with interesting content. As always, thank you for watching, and be sure to join us on the next by subscribing to our channel and clicking on the notification bell to keep you up to date with our video uploads. And one more thing, don't forget to click on the thumbs up icon. See ya!